simple example. You practiced that, able to do that example. So output, input, all the properties. So these are all related to which concept? So events. These are all related to events. So component related options. Now, today we will see another important, that is angular component life cycle hooks. Angular component life cycle hooks. This is very important topic for interviews. Angular related interviews. Generally, so many questions are asked on this particular topic. One major concept is data binding. Another concept is this life cycle. In data binding, all concept will come. I told you that one-way, two-way bindings, style class bindings, event bindings. So questions in Angular in interviews mostly will be around these topics. So you must be very clear into major concepts. One is custom events. Another one is this component lifecycle hooks. Actually, what is component lifecycle hook? I will explain the point. Generally, Angular have a high level design. In the beginning of Angular, I explained you the overview of the flow of Angular application. In that flow, if you remembered, we discussed about how application starts. There will be a file called main.ts. In that, there will be a bootstrap. Bootstrap indicates which module to start. By default, app module will start. We changed that, the flow we discussed. But you need to know another concept, generally how Angular application works. Actually, how the components are loaded, how the components work, one diagram I will show you. Means one request flow I will show here. Actually, so we have client. So we have the client, that is the user. So we are having this client. The client is user. The client, so that is user. When user makes a request, actually this is our Angular application. So we have our Angular application here. This is Angular app. In this application, you have some components like login, like register, like home. Some components are present. So Angular is a single page application. Angular starts with which page? Index.html. In that index.html, all these will come. Login, register. Which one you need, that will come. That means we are not designing navigation from one page to another. Actually, what we are doing, we are having only one page and everything comes onto that page. You want login, you want register, everything comes onto that particular index page. That flow you will learn in a topic called routing. Later, when you learn routing, you will see that. Here, generally what happens is we have the component client makes a request. How this is going to work, I will tell you. Client makes a request. So this request usually comes to web server. Client makes a request. That request comes to web server. We call this web server as HTTP server. We call it as HTTP server, web server or HTTP server. So whenever client wants anything, then automatically the request will be processed by this web server. Generally, you saw our Angular application is running in which port number? It is running on server. It is http:// localhost. So 4200. It is running here. Now what happens is, in your application, how many components are there? Those components related information is maintained in a table. It is maintained in a table. That components information is maintained in a table. Table is nothing like, it is like index table. You see table of contents. Whenever you open a book, in that first you will have table of contents. Table of contents will tell which topic in which page. So that if you want to go to any particular topic, you can directly go to that particular page. Similarly, for an Angular application also, there will be a table. That table contains information about which component is present and how it can be requested. That means what are the components present, it will have a information. So component, we have login. Another component we have register. Another component we have home. How they are requested, that also defined here, like /login. This is requested /register. This is requested like /home. Actually, this is the path. That is the path. And this is the component. Which component to deliver on that particular request. This is a table which contains information about what are the components available and how we can request those components. This table is called as, route table. This table is called as route table. So in Angular, a route table contains information about what are the components available and how they can be requested. So that means anyone wants to access your component, then for that the route table is important. This route table contains information about what are available components and how they can be requested. Now what happens here? Client makes a request. So client says that /login. After http://4200, he will use login. When client makes a request login, from where he will make a request? Usually request he will make from a browser. That means generally how the request will be, login means not directly login. Usually request will be like http:// localhost, what is it, 4200/ in that login. Like this it will be. Now when client makes a request, this request will first come to, the request will come to web server. This web server actually contains, usually web server contains a HTTP processing pipeline. It contains a HTTP processing pipeline. Remember, this is present everywhere. Every web application have to work in the same way. Whether you may be using Java, .NET, PHP, Python, every web application, the basic request will first come to where? The request will come to web server. Web server is an HTTP server. The request will come to web server. This request will be processed on, it request will be processed in a pipeline. We call HTTP processing pipeline. In that pipeline, who will process your request? Actually, your request is processed by HTTP handler. A HTTP handler is going to manage your request. Whatever the request you made, it will be processed by this handler. Handler is responsible for handling requests like get, post, put, delete. All such interactions are managed by HTTP handler. So you requested something, then the request will come to web server. That web server will process the request using a HTTP handler. What this HTTP handler will do is, it will first verify, is the request get, is the request post, like that. Get means what? Get means fetching information from server. Post means submitting information to server. You want to fetch information from server or you want to submit information to server. That is managed by this handler. Now this handler will make use of an engine. It will use an engine. We call this engine as routing engine. We call this engine as routing engine. What is the purpose of this routing engine is nothing but this routing engine is going to access your request and it will verify whether the requested path is available or not. That means you will make a request login. It will go to routing engine. Routing engine will connect with route table. Route table is present in Angular application. Now that route table, how to create, we will see next level. This routing engine will verify whether the particular requested path is available or not. If it is available, then what will happen? It will load this component. It will load this component into index. Understood? It will load the component into index. After loading the component, that means this will load the component. That component output will be sent to the routing engine. This routing engine will send that output to handler. Handler will send that to home client. And if there is any problem in request, then this routing engine will use several requests, like it will return 200 status code. It will return 200 status code. 200 status code is used for success. 200 status codes will be there. 300 status codes will be there. 400 status codes will be there. 500 status codes will be there. Actually, we call them as status code. These are called as status codes. We call them as status code. Status codes are nothing but if you requested something and it is not available. If you requested something and it is not available, it will return 404. 404 means what? Not found. That is the request code. Remember, 200 request codes actually. 200 request code means, I will tell you the process here. 200 request code is nothing but it is related to success. That means your request is success, then it will give 200. It will have 200, 201, 202, 203 like that. That is for success. 300 codes are for redirection. Redirection means navigating from one place to another. That is 300. 300 means navigation. 400 means 400 is nothing but it is related to client side errors. Client side error means page you requested not found. The path you defined is not available. All such messages will come 400. Client side problems. Server side problems 500. Server not responding. Server is taking more time. So server is disconnected. All such messages are managed with which code? 500. So in web technologies, errors are managed by using these status codes. Errors we show by using these status codes. Now what happens here is you make a request. This request will come to web server. Web server will process that request using a HTTP handler. It will make use of a routing engine. This routing engine will take help of route table. It will verify whether the requested path is available in that application or not. If it is available, then it will load that component. And after that, it will deliver that component to you on screen so that you can see login. Now the question is, this is just flow. Now the question is, what is the lifespan of login? How much time that login will be there? What is the lifespan of that login? How it loads, how this login loads? What are the various phases of log? Actually, for example, you have a class. In object-oriented programming, we have a class. So in a class, what is the first phase? In order to access the members of a class, I want to access members of a class. What is the first phase? First phase is you have to create an object for that class. Who will create an object for that class? Who will create an object for that class? Who is responsible for creating an object for class? Question understood? A class is there. We have to access that members of the class. For that, we need to create an object. Who is responsible for creating object? In class, who? Constructor, na? Constructor, na? So constructor responsibility is to create an object. So what is the phase? Phase is creating object. Who is responsible for that? A method. Who is that method? Constructor. That means the phase name is creating object, and that phase is managed by a method. In Angular also same. In Angular, every component have several phases, and those phases are managed by methods. Those phases are managed by methods. Those are called as, we call those as life cycle hooks. Life cycle means what? From the time it started to the time it ends. Generally, when a component will end, there are two situations. A component usually ends once you finish the component and go to next. When you are moving from one component to another, the previous component is destroyed and the next component is loaded. Or the component will end when you close the application. When you close the application, component will end. So component has several phases between start to end. That means between start to end, so many phases will be there. Those phases are called life cycle hooks. That we will see now. What are those phases? When which action is performed, we will see. First important is C. This diagram I will upload. First, I will explain the process. First thing, what is the Angular application flow? In Angular application flow, first thing is client makes a request from browser. It will be like http:/localhost 4200/login. So the request will be processed in HTTP server by using HTTP handler. By using HTTP handler inside HTTP inside where HTTP processing pipeline. Inside HTTP processing pipeline. So client makes a request from browser. When client makes a request from browser, the request to be processed in HTTP server. Who will process? HTTP handler. Where it will process? In HTTP. So after processing, what it will do is HTTP handler uses a routing engine. It uses a routing engine. What routing engine will? Routing engine gets the URL request and checks with home route table. Routing engine gets the URL request and it will verify. It will check with the home route table. Virtual table which contains information about the components and their path, right? That means route table comprises of information about the request and component. So if requested path is not matching with route path in table, then it returns 404. 404 is what? Not found. It will return 404. There can be various requests actually. 200 request is for success. 300 request is for redirection. This is for redirection. Redirection navigating from one place to another. 400 request is for, this is client side error. It is so many are there. 400, 401, 402, 403 like that. So 500 codes are related to server side errors. These are major ones. 501, 502, 503, those are server side errors. Now, if the requested path is available, if requested path is matching, then what will happen? If requested path is matching, the then the component then the component is created. First the component is created.